Good morning. It is Monday, October 19th. Is it the 19th? What is time? What are days? It is Monday, I think October 19th, and the start of a new weekly reading vlog. And I am very excited about everything that I have on deck this week. So physically, as I mentioned at the end of last week's reading vlog, the one that I just wrapped up a moment ago, I am not very far into The Forest of Souls by LaRue M. Lee. So this is going to be my next physical read, and you know, will certainly take the rest of the week if I can even finish it this week. So yeah, this will be my physical read, and I'll talk more about it kind of when I'm further into it. As far as audio, I'm 62% into the audiobook of The Night Circus and really enjoying the book and the audiobook and the narration. And I'll also talk more about that. I talked about it a little bit at the end of the reading vlog that I just wrapped up, but I'll talk about it again a little bit more once I think I finish it. And then I also, as far as my next audiobooks, I recently got The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue to come through on my hold from the library. I've been really lucky, kind of as long as I know when books are coming out and I can kind of stalk the Libby app. I've been really actually lucky about being able to catch some new releases pretty early on when they actually put it on to Libby. So there have been quite a few new releases that I haven't actually had to wait that long for. So I already have access to The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, and I'm incredibly excited about this one. I wasn't sure it would come in, but I'm just too excited about it. I have to listen to it now. It also seems like it'll be a really fun book for this time of year and a super atmospheric book, and so I'm very excited about that one. And those are my main plans for this week. I also need to get to 2 nonfiction books before the end of the month. I don't remember exactly when the X Book Club's live show is going to be for their 2 books, and I'll have to see, just based on when the actual time is. I'll have to see if I can actually make it or if I'll have to watch it later and then kind of add my thoughts. But I do want to read both of the books for the X Book Club, so I do want to make sure I read both of these as well, and so we'll kind of see how many books I can get through this week. I think they said it would be later on in the month of October, so hopefully late October, and I'll still have time to get through both of these by the end of the month and still be able to add my thoughts and kind of listen in on what everyone is having to say about those books. So we'll see how much I can get to, but those are the plans for this week, and I'll check in later. Good morning. It is October 23rd, Friday morning, and I have some updates. One, I finished The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. Again, I listened on audio and I absolutely adored this one. I love the audiobook, first of all. As I mentioned, Jim Dale narrates and did a fantastic job. So I don't know what my experience would have been like first reading this only physically versus listening to the audiobook, but I absolutely adored this book. This book was fall in a book. It was literally all of the fall vibes that I was looking for, and there was just something so comforting about it for me. It was an interesting experience, but I absolutely adored it, and I can definitely see myself rereading this one a lot and getting that same just cozy, comforting feeling that I got listening to the audiobook. And I described a little bit about what it's about. There's really not much more to say about the plot than what I said before, so I'll just wrap up and say that I absolutely enjoyed this book from start to finish. It's just so whimsical, and I just love the imagery and just going through this world and going through this circus, and you know, getting to know some of these characters. Her character work is super interesting, so I noticed this in the Starless Sea as well. It doesn't, you always, at least I feel like I'm kind of at a distance from the character the way she writes, but for some reason I don't mind it. Like, it's weird. Normally I don't like feeling super distant from the characters. I've come to find that I'm a pretty character based reader, and I don't know, there's just something that kind of removes you from the individual characters, just so that you can kind of, I guess, see the overall world and picture that she wants you to see. And I think it works. It at least works for me. And I had such a fun time listening to this one. So definitely enjoyed that. I am also like 90% through the audiobook of The Invisible Life of Addie, LaRue by V.E. Schwab. So I'll talk more about my thoughts about the end when I next check in, but I also just wanted to mention that I am most of the way through that and have, again, absolutely adored this book. Like, this I think is going to be one of my favorites of the year as well. And this one follows Addie LaRue, who, in an attempt to escape a marriage that she's about to, she lives in France in 1714, and is you know, her hand is kind of forced in a marriage that she doesn't want, and she makes a bargain for the devil for her freedom, but the cost of that ends up being that nobody remembers her and that she's immortal. So she does live forever and, in a sense, kind of is free from ties, but that's because no one actually remembers who she is once she's out of sight. She's also out of mind. And just the writing in this is stunning, and just the emotion that this book has evoked the entire time. It's a very interestingly told story, and I think the way she's doing the timelines is really, really effective. So you follow Addie as a kid, you follow her you know, at this moment when she makes this bargain with the devil. You also follow her 300 years later when she meets Henry in a bookstore, and he actually remembers her the second time that he sees her in this bookstore. And, you know, she's trying to figure out what's going on. Why does this random person remember her? And so you kind of flash back and forth from present day when she's meeting Henry, but also kind of bits and pieces of her past throughout the 300 years that she's been alive and, you know, under this curse. And again, the writing is just gorgeous. And I've fallen in love with the story, and it's really, really hard to describe completely why I've fallen in love with the story or the depth that I've fallen in love with this story. But I'm absolutely loving it. I just can feel everything that Addie is feeling. It's been good to get to know Henry as well, and just some of the people that are around them. And I think Schwab just utterly captures the feeling of wanting to leave a mark on the world and wanting to be remembered in the world. And it's gorgeous. I love it. So I'll finish that up hopefully today, and then I haven't really read much more in Forest of Souls because I've just been captured by these two audiobooks, and I just haven't really paid attention to Forest of Souls, but I'll turn back to that once I'm finished with Addie LaRue. My next audiobooks will be the two nonfictions that I have left for the month. Just other books have been calling me, and I've just been so excited about everything else on my TBR that I just haven't gotten around to these. But it's the two books for the X bookmark, and so I need to get to those. So I'll talk more about those once I get to those. But those will be my next audiobooks, and then I'll physically continue in Forest of Souls. So I'll check in later. So it is Sunday afternoon, and I have a couple of updates. First of all, I did finish The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I talked about it in my recent update. There's not much more to say except I loved it just as much throughout the rest of the book. I really liked how it ended and how it wrapped up, and just I want a physical copy of this book, and I want to just annotate and kind of re-immerse myself in the gorgeous writing. I adored this book. I adored everything about this book, so definitely would recommend. So I then turned to The Future We Choose, and this is for the X Book Club. This is a climate change nonfiction, and I actually just finished it this morning, and I really, really liked this one. So it's kind of a high level, like it doesn't really get into too many specifics. It's a pretty short book, and I think it sets out, or what it sets out to do, I think it does successfully. So they essentially kind of argue that there's the window of opportunity to actually be able to do something on climate change is closing, but that it has not closed yet from what we can tell based on the science, and that there is still some time, a little bit of time, to kind of help mitigate the worst impacts of climate change, and kind of still a little bit of time to kind of shift the trajectory, maybe not to, you know, the ideal end of the spectrum, but maybe at least not towards the worst end of the spectrum as far as potential climate change impacts. And so they argue that they kind of outline or kind of give it a vision for two different futures that people can choose. You know, one with kind of the worst impacts, and one where, you know, some things have changed, some things are not ideal, society is structured differently, and we've had to get used to a lot of things being different, but there are still many things that we can achieve in that amount of time that can still make huge improvements on quality of life, even if that kind of life is different than what we might be used to, and that those changes need to happen, and that those changes need to happen in order to make these systems more sustainable. And I thought they did a pretty good picture, or did a pretty good job just kind of briefly giving a mental picture for the two stark differences in these choices and really what we're fighting for. And I thought that was a pretty well done kind of tactic to kind of communicate their message. And then they kind of go into 10 different steps overall, as well as some personal actions and decisions and choices that you can make. And I think they try to walk a fine line between recognizing that systemic change is required, and that there are some things that are just larger than individual people that need to happen, and that if the focus is solely on what individuals can do, then sometimes you kind of lose sight of those huge structures that also need to change. And you know, if the attention isn't there, then that huge shift that needs to happen isn't being focused on. But they also don't ignore the fact that individual actions not only can scale up and can add up, but that also individuals make up these structures and also choose kind of what they do with their life. They kind of choose what structures they want to further and want to build up and want to change. And so I thought they did, it's a hard line to walk, but I thought they kind of did a good job talking about both. And I ultimately just thought it was a cautiously optimistic book, which was kind of nice to read. And I definitely am going to want, so I listened to the audiobook narrated by the authors. I thought they did a pretty good job narrating it as well. I actually appreciated both of their narrations. And I'm definitely going to want to get a physical copy to annotate some things and to kind of mark some key passages and mark some key quotes that I think I'll want to return to, just to kind of keep myself motivated. And I thought that ultimately, I think this was a gift to the climate activist community. I don't know if it's necessarily going to reach new audiences. Maybe it will. It's kind of hard to tell if these can actually reach new audiences and kind of bring more people into the climate activist community, or into the group of people who are aware and conscious and trying to actively do what they can. I certainly hope it does, but I think at the very least this is a gift to the climate activist community that sometimes just needs a ray of hope to keep going on and to keep fighting. And so I really commend the authors for doing that. So definitely looking forward to getting a physical copy, rereading multiple times, annotating, turning back to this when I need it. I definitely can see that. Those are the two updates. I then started the second book for the X Book Club. They're going to be talking about two different books that are environmentally themed, and they're going to be talking about it at some point soon. I'll need to double check if they've announced a date. So the second book is Unbowed by Wangari Maathai, and this is a memoir of an incredibly important environment and climate activist, and from Kenya. So definitely very excited to continue reading that. And That plus continuing, I'm about now halfway through Forest of Souls by Lori and Lee. I'm actually having fun with this one, so we'll see if I continue to enjoy that one. I'll probably talk about that one more in next week's vlog, I imagine. We'll see how much more I can get read tonight. I'll check in tomorrow morning. Maybe I'll give some more thoughts tomorrow morning as I wrap up the vlog. But I'll probably talk more about it in next week's vlog. But yeah, that's the update for now. Good morning. It is Monday, October 26th, and I'm here to wrap up this reading vlog. It's been such a good reading week. Finishing The Night Circus, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, The Future We Choose. It's been a really good reading week. And as far as physical reading, I am now about less than 150 pages from the end of Forest of Souls. This one has actually been pretty fun so far. I've heard some mixed things about it, but overall I'm enjoying it, and I think October was a really good time to read it with the creepy forest going on. So I'll talk more about that in next week's vlog, but I'm having actually a really good time with that one. And currently listening to Unbowed by Wangari Maathai, and I think I'm, what, a quarter of the way through that maybe? So I definitely have a bit more to go on that one. But yeah, that was my reading week. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be sure to link my Twitter and Instagram down below. That's where I like to hang out, and I'll link more information about how you can support the Black Lives Matter movement, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.